Our story begins with two characters overlooking a vast and green, luscious field. My name is Suho Kim. No, in this world, my name is Lloyd Frontera. This is the story of how your average civil engineering student turned an entire world upside down. As we get a complete look at the grid completed, showing buildings to be erected, skyscrapers and all sorts. Lloyd says to the other character standing next to him, Javier, "Yes, Master Lloyd? This is all money." "Have you finally lost it, sir?" says Javier. We then cut to a few years ago. A notification pops up. You have been chosen to have a random wish granted by the Absolute. Another notification pops up. Congrats, with the smiley face emoji and 3 claps. Lloyd wakes up on the ground confused with a little drool on his lip, looking at the notification. Another notification reads, "You are now a character of Knight of Blood and Iron." Lloyd thinks to himself, Knight of Blood and Iron, the book I read last night? Another notification. "Good luck, you've got this." Thinks to himself, a wish. Good luck with that. I haven't even had anything to drink. Oh, is this one of those web novels where I've possessed someone from a different world? Am I in a different world right now? So then, why am I waking up face down on a dirt road? What's going on? As Lloyd stands up, shivering from the freezing cold, he thinks to himself, what's wrong with my lips? Another notification alert pops up and it states that your jaw has gone out of place from sleeping on the ground. Lloyd slaps at the notification with a bit of frustration. I know that. These alerts are starting to tick me off. So I get that I've taken over some character in this story as he rubs his jaw, a bit confused at the situation. But who have I taken over in Knight of Blood and Iron? The only person who lived in the middle of nowhere and fell asleep on the ground was Master Lloyd. As he hears someone call his name. There you are. I've been looking everywhere for you. We then get a picture of Javier walking up to Master Lloyd, and he says, let us return to the manor. We learn that this Javier is the actual protagonist of Knight of Blood and Iron, Javier Azrahan. Lloyd looks at him a bit confused, but he thinks to himself, he looks just like in the book. Did he just call me Lloyd? We learn that in the book, he is Javier, the renowned swordsman. But he starts off as an unknown knight working for the country lord, Arcos Frontera. And the eldest son of the Baron Frontera is, I'm the hooligan Lloyd Frontera, as our main character worriedly shouts in confusion and surprise. They both look at each other, a bit speechless. Javier then says, I called your name, but I've never called you a hooligan. Well, it's good that you are a bit self-aware at least. Then we see a notification read, Javier seems to be in a good mood. Lloyd just thinks to himself, I can see that. Shut up already. We then cut to a manor where we see Javier shuffling around the charcoal in the fireplace. And he says, so you have no idea how you ended up like that? You started drinking in the afternoon, got drunk, destroyed the pub furniture, and then you passed out on your way back to the manor. Lloyd just thinks to himself, that really is the day in the life of a hooligan. Javier continues, his lordship was worried and he sent me. You may be a hooligan, but you are his son. If you die on the road with your jaw out of place, he'll definitely be sad. Lloyd just thinks to himself, he really sneaks those attacks in there. Low blows. It's cold. If the floor could just be a heated andal as he reaches down the feel for the floor. And we get a footnote. An andal is a traditional Korean underfloor heating system. Lloyd continues to think to himself, yeah, I didn't think so. This is a medieval fantasy novel. Javier turns to Lloyd and tells him, I will leave the rest to you, sir. I will report what happened to his lordship tomorrow. Lloyd just looks a little bit worried. Do you have to? Javier responds, yes. Lloyd just thinks, he's so uptight. Lloyd then says, wait, Javier. Yes, Master Lloyd, our family has a lot of debt, don't we? With a worried expression on his face. Javier says, what a strange thing to say, and walks out the door. As Lloyd sits on the bed, a bit speechless, he thinks to himself, I know everything that happens in this story. Just last night in my microscopic boarding house room, I read the last chapter, And of course, I know what happens to Lloyd. Part 1. The Baron and Baroness fall prey to an evil con man, lose all of their land and fortune, and then commits suicide. Lloyd then becomes a beggar, drinking all day long, and then he, as we see Lloyd on the table drunk, beer, bring me more beer. Then he coughs up blood and he dies. What's the point of being an aristocrat then? As he shouts, standing up from the bed, it's the same miserable life like it was in Korea. What the heck kind of guy is this Absolute? As we get a picture of the alarm that popped up telling Lloyd that he has been chosen to have a random wish granted by the Absolute. What did I wish for that would put me in the body of someone with such an ending? Next, we see a lady walking up to Lloyd. You broke things at the pub last night. Lloyd's mother says to Lloyd, Marabella Frontera. Lloyd just thinks to himself, no, last night I was reading a book. Lloyd's mother then says to Lloyd, I beg you, Lloyd, this time go to the pub and apologize. Lloyd thinks to himself, I guess it's a mess that this body made, so I have to go clean it up. He then says to his mother, yes, okay, I'll do it. Lloyd's mother and Javier both with shocked expressions on their face, and then we see a notification that also exclaims, these two people are highly confused by your response. Lloyd just thinks to himself frustratingly, could they not give me a little credit? We then cut to one of the villagers putting a bale of hay in the back of his wagon. As he turns around and he notices Lloyd and Javier walking up through the village, he starts to scramble behind his wagon as if he's hiding. As Lloyd is passing by, we see questioning, why is the man hiding to himself? He says nothing, but he then notices that as all the other villagers notice him, they start to scramble. Still, he's a bit confused. He says nothing. A kid looking out the window at him snatched back inside, and his parents saying, don't make eye contact. And they slam the window. We then get a notification. The villagers absolutely detest you. Lloyd just thinks to himself, yeah, I got that. Lloyd says to Javier, by the way, Javier, why are you following me? Javier responds, his lordship ordered me to escort you so that what happened yesterday does not reoccur. Lloyd responds confused. Escort me? Hardly. It's for the villagers. I'm protecting them from you. Javier responds. Oh, so I'm like a gangster for real, says Lloyd. I guess the first thing I need to do is to get rid of this scumbag-like image that I have. That way I can at least get myself some food when I'm a beggar, as he thinks to himself with a worried expression. No. If I can sort out my family's debt before that happens, I can live peacefully as the heir to a country baron and live a sweet, comfortable life to a ripe old age. As he thinks about the bliss it would be if all his problems were solved by fixing his issues with the villagers. He then thinks to himself, is there no cheat code or skill I can use? He gets a notification pop up. So I do have a skill? Lloyd sees the notification, and the notification reads as follows. Lloyd's skills. Human scum. A passive skill. It causes others to furrow their brows. Rowdy drunkard. When this skill is used, you become an absolute ass. As Lloyd waves at the notification, Javier just looks on a bit confused at his actions. Master Lloyd, where are you going? What? As Lloyd turns around and looked a bit confused at Javier, Javier says to him, the pub is over here. Were you lying when you said that you would apologize? Lloyd looks at him a bit worried. No. I was thinking about something. Javier just looks speechless with a stern look on his face. What's wrong with you? What's with the look? What's up? As Lloyd looks back at Javier, sweating, Javier just says, it's nothing. Let us go in. As Lloyd opens the door to walk into the pub, hello? Excuse me. Javier just looks at him and he thinks to himself, something has seemed off since last night. It is as if he's a completely different person. We then cut to a scene where we see broken tables, broken chairs scattered about the floor. We see a hole in a wall with a fixture of a skull with a missing horn. Lloyd just sits at the table with his head bowed and he says, forgive me. Everything that happened last night was my fault. As Javier looks down at Lloyd, a bit confused, we see that the pub owner, speechless and shaken from fear, seeing Lloyd again, and then seeing Lloyd apologizing to him. He has no words. We then see a notification. The pub owner has assumed the position of extreme high alert. The pub owner says, Master Lloyd, I beg you, please, do not do this. Lloyd thinks to himself, oh, is that what's happening? He's even more terrified because of this scumbag suddenly being so polite. Then I'll be a little ruder, Lloyd thinks to himself. Well, I guess I'm sorry, he says to the terrified pub owner with a bit of swagger. A notification pops up. Your apology does not seem very genuine. Lloyd just thinks, come on, what am I supposed to do? The pub owner, relaxed a bit, still though, with the worried expression on his face, looks up at Lloyd and he says, it's fine. You don't have to apologize. Lloyd looks back at him a bit speechless. We cut to a scene where Lloyd and Javier has left the pub. And Lloyd says to Javier, even when I apologize, he didn't seem all that happy. Javier responds with, that's to be expected. Everything you destroyed yesterday, his furniture and decorations, they were all purchased with the pub owner's hard-earned money. He likely won't be satisfied until he is compensated. Lloyd thinks to himself, compensating him when we have so much debt. It's so hard to get any brownie points from these villagers. So if we don't repay the debt, nothing is going to change. But how? Not only that, says Javier, the pub owner's mother is sick after the late winter cold. Combine that with your misconduct, and you can imagine just how hard things must be for him, says Javier. Lloyd thinks to himself, the inside of the pub was rather chilly. A single fireplace isn't enough to heat up the entire building. The elderly can't handle that kind of cold for very long, not unless they have ondule floors. He then stops walking, and he's thinking. He has his eyes wide, and then we see a little light bulb begins to flicker. And as he's thinking to himself, I got it. It's like a light bulb went off in my head. We then see blueprints, lines and grids pop up in Lloyd's head. There are no ondule floors here. If I build them in this world, they would definitely sell. The hooligan Lloyd Frontera could never dream of this kind of stuff. But the real me, Suho Kim, I can. In school, I majored in civil engineering. During my time as a military engineer in the Army, I constructed a house and I built it all by myself. I worked day and night working at construction sites too. This is it. With this, I can settle all of the Baron's debt. Excited at his new idea, he clenches his fist and he tells Javier, let's go back to the pub. Javier just says, and why is that? As Lloyd strides off, he turns around and he says to Javier, to get my first order. Notification pops up. Your true journey has begun. RP system has been activated. And we learn that RP is relationship points. Another notification reads, you can now earn RP by improving relationships with key characters. Another notification reads, current RP total, 0. As Lloyd reads the notification, he is a bit confused. He thinks to himself, RP, is that like experience points? As he reads the notification pops up, he thinks to himself, there's nothing about how to use them though. By improving relationships with key characters means, as he reads the notification that reads, you can earn RP by improving relationship with key characters. Oh, I see. I see something. As he looks back at Javier, there it is. He sees the notification screen that reads your approval rating -30. Javier looks at him without saying anything, a bit confused. That's low, right? I bet that is super low. Lloyd thinks to himself. Hey, Javier. Yes, Master Lloyd? I really think you are good looking. Lloyd is trying to buy Javier's favor. A notification pops up. Javier stands there. Javier responds with, I know that already. And we get a notification pop up. Javier's approval rating of you has decreased by 1 point. Your approval rating, -31. Lloyd just thinks to himself, what? Why did it go down? He then turns away and continues walking. You know what? Let's just leave this for later. And Javier's speechless. Lloyd continues to think to himself, if I rush it, I'll just make it worse. We then cut back to the pub and we see Lloyd writing up a contract. And he says to the pub owner, so you are the purchaser and I'll be the builder. We'll write off all construction fees against all the property that I damaged. Now, sign here. As he hands over the contract to the pub owner, a notification pops up. The pub owner is looking at you suspiciously. Lloyd thinks to himself, this is the problem. No one has any trust in this guy. And we see another notification pop up. Pub owner uses skill Stonewall Heart. Lloyd then thinks, my big plan can't fail from the start. I didn't want to resort to this, but let's use his hooligan-like image. Then we see Lloyd frown a bit and make a gangster-like face as he says to the pub owner, you know what? Come on. We're going to see each other a lot from now on. Let's trust each other, huh? Well, we then see the pub owner hurriedly grab the pen and start signing the contract. Lloyd thinks to himself, oh yeah, it worked. A notification pops up. Wow, you are absolute garbage. Lloyd thinks, so what? What was I supposed to do? And with an evil-like excited grin on his face, he just thinks to himself, I got my first order. And he quickly puts the contract within his coat pocket. Lloyd says to the pub owner, you've made the right choice, sir. I won't let you down. And Javier just looks on speechless without saying anything. We cut to Lloyd in the back of the pub and he's thinking to himself, it's going to be pretty cozy, so I don't need to be too precise with my measurements. Javier says to Lloyd, Master Lloyd, yes, you threatened the pub owner to sign that contract. Are you coming up with new ways to cause trouble? As Lloyd turns around and looks at Javier, you're not as reasonable as you seem. Have you ever heard of cognitive distortion? Javier looks at Lloyd and questions, cognitive distortion. And Lloyd responds, it's where you believe that someone will do this and that because of what they did in the past. It's the distortion caused by prejudice and the negative thinking clinging to your brain. Javier just responds with, it's not prejudice. It's based on experience and statistics. Lloyd says to Javier, our experience and statistics not all from the past? Javier, speechless, as he thinks to himself, what? Has he always been a smooth talker? Lloyd just says, I'll make them smile, which surprises Javier, the pub owner and his mother. I'll make them smile for sure. As he shoves the shovel in the ground to get the work started, he's thinking to himself, because those smiles will be the foundation of my money-making empire. We then see Lloyd hard at work, scoop out the dirt, move it, pack it, and repeat. The timber is from the warehouse at the Baron's residence. It's going to be a traditional timber frame. And I'll use the clay that I dug up from the river to complete the walls. We then see Lloyd on the ground sweating bullets, tired from all the construction that he has completed so far. He thinks to himself, this body is so weak. Javier says out loud to Lloyd, you know, that didn't take long. Lloyd gets up, a bit frustrated and tired. It took a week. Javier thinks, a bit confused at the situation. He really is building something. Where did he learn this? Is he really planning on honoring his contract with the pub owner? There is no way that the hooligan Lloyd Frontera can pull off something like this. As Lloyd gets up from the ground, you can see his body is a bit shaky. He's trembling. He says out loud, I am so sore. There is no time to rest. As he grabs the axe handle, trembling more. As he gets ready to swing the axe, he staggers a bit. And as he's staggering, Javier comes from behind and he grabs the axe, keeps him from falling. He takes the axe from Lloyd and he asks him, what do you need me to do? Lloyd responds with, I need thin little pieces of wood, each one about 2 hands length tall, 1 hand's length wide, and 1 finger thick. We then see Javier grab 3 pieces of logs and he tosses them up nonchalantly. And with his axe, he swings and he slice, cuts every piece of wood that Lloyd needed to the exact measurement. And with an expression of shock and surprise on his face, and with the thumbs up, Lloyd thinks to himself, whoa, truly, this is someone about to become a master swordsman. Who needs modern equipment? Lloyd places his hand on Javier's shoulder as he says, Javier, when you're done, why don't you help me with the digging? Javier thinks to himself, instead of thanking me, he gives me more work to do? This man is truly hopeless. We get a notification that reads, Javier regrets his decision. Lloyd says to Javier, you're helping because you're curious, aren't you? This man is clearly out of his mind. He's a con. How will he do it? You really want to see what happens. Isn't that right? Then what do you have to do? The work needs to be finished faster, right? And how do we do that? By doing it together. Javier just looks speechless as he thinks to himself, he's not wrong. He's completely changed since a few days ago, but his past makes him utterly impossible to trust. All I can do is hurry this up to see. And we then cut to a picture where we see Javier and Lloyd hard at work digging out the floors for the building. Shovel, fling, twirl, slam. We see Lloyd, fist raised in the air. Construction complete. Javier asks Lloyd, "Are those letters?" Lloyd responds with, "Yeah, it's my brand logo." Javier questions, "A logo?" Lloyd just says, "It's a thing." Lloyd then turns around and he says to Javier, "Right, Javier, shall we go find out what sort of con that I've cooked up for the pub owner?" Javier remains speechless. As the cold wind blows outside, we cut inside to the building that was just constructed, and we see that a fireplace has been started. We then see that the pub owner's mother is on the ground and she's comfy. We then see the pub owner with an expression on his face of surprise. And then his mother next to him, flat out sprawled on the floor as she says, "Oh, dear me. It's lovely. It's so good. All my joints feel so relaxed." Pub owner, shocked and surprised at the construction, he says, "Wait, how can this be?" As he feels the heat emanating from the ground, Lloyd looks on with a smile on his face as he thinks to himself, "This must be astounding to the people of this world. This is the powers of the Andal floor. It's like magic." A pub owner says to Lloyd, "Thank you so much, young master. It's been so long since I've seen my mother smile like this." Javier, eyes wide and surprised, thinks to himself, the pub owner and his mother, they both smiled just as he said. What is this? As if the change in his speech and his manners weren't enough. Now he works hard and he keeps his promise to the people of the land. Did he really do this to make those two people smile? There is no way Lloyd Frontera would ever do such a thing. And yet, somehow, it has happened. Both the pub owner and the pub owner's mother, with expressions of joy and happiness and smiles on their faces. Javier looks onto them and he smiles himself and he thinks, those two people are happy right now. We then get a notification. Your approval rating by Javier increased by 2 points. Your approval rating is now -21. You've earned 36 RP from improving your relationship slightly with a key character. As Lloyd reads the notification, he smiles. He turns to Javier and he says, "I know what you're thinking. Wow, this guy isn't total garbage after all." Javier looks away. "Nope." Lloyd just says, "I think you are." Javier responds with, "I'm not." Lloyd then just thinks to himself, regardless, we've broken ground now. Just with the cost of timber, it was a total loss. But that's not important. It's because this house is merely a model house that I will use for show. A few days later, we see a line started up outside the house that Lloyd had completed. And we see Lloyd and Javier sitting outside watching the people as they go in. We see a villager that just walked out from the house experiencing the heated floors. He says out loud, "Wow, I thought I was going to melt." Another villager says to him, "That much?" As the villager walks by Lloyd, "Woo, amazing, ain't it? Really warm. I bet you probably want a room like this at your home, don't you?" As he's tapping the desk, showing the contracts and the order papers, he then holds up a piece of paper to the villager and he explains, Style A is an annex in the yard. Style B is remodeling your current home. And I'll give you a 10% discount off the cost of construction if you order both. The villager kind of looks down a bit worried after even experiencing the heated floors. And he says, no, we get a notification. The villagers don't trust you. We then see Lloyd with a gangster-like expression on his face again. "Come on, we'll see each other often, so let's trust each other." Huh? "Well, you don't trust me? Are you really doing this to me? At this price, I'm practically giving it away." We then hear someone call Lloyd's name. As Lloyd looks to see who it is, he sees that it is his father. And he's walking up and his father is asking him, "What do you think you are doing?" We learn that this is Lloyd's father, Lloyd Frontera. We see a notification pop up. Your approval rating, -20. As Lloyd looks on a bit worried and speechless to see his dad. We cut back to the manor and we see that Lloyd is at a dinner table, a very long dinner table with his father. They both are eating. Lloyd is glancing up at his father, thinking to himself, I've managed to avoid him until now, but what if he stops me from building? Lloyd's father then says, "So, let's hear it. What is it that you're up to this time?" Let's just keep it short. He then responds, "The pub owner ordered an indoor room, so I built him one," thinking to himself in my best rude Lloyd voice. The father responds, "And the other people of the land are making orders as well?" Lloyd just says, "You seem to know it all already." The father responds, "There are the people that we must look after. I won't tolerate you lying to them or tricking them." Lloyd responds with, "I wasn't planning to, so don't worry," thinking to himself that I figured no matter what I do, everyone thinks the worst. If we're finished here, I'll take my leave. As he thinks to himself, run, I gotta get out of here. I gotta go. The father asks Lloyd before he leaves the room, "Is this all because of the family situation? You have eyes and ears. You must know what's going on." The father continues, "Don't worry. I can get us out of this trouble soon. So don't get yourself too involved in this." Lloyd turns around and he looks at his dad, speechless, thinking to himself that I've heard those words before. We cut to a scene where we see a man and he says, "Hey, Suho, it'll all be fine, so don't worry. This is nothing. Just keep your head down and study hard." Lloyd continues to think to himself, I really thought everything would be okay. Liar, I know it's not okay. I'm not going to be miserable again because of stupid money. And as he walks out the room, he says to his father, "Please, don't give up, because I won't either." As he walks out the room, he thinks to himself, that time a few years ago. I wish I had said those words to my father then. As he continues to walk through the hallway, he continues to ponder. All right, let's see. Right now, we have 32 style A orders and 57 style B orders. I've received half of the money for construction. He then notices two gentlemen walking in front of him. We then learn that they are moneylender Meatloaf and moneylender Shiloh. Lloyd just passes them in the hallway and they pass him. And Lloyd thinks to himself, what's this? I'm the son of the Lord, yet they don't stop to greet me? As he turns to get a better look, he thinks to himself, wait, are those two? We then cut to the next scene where we see the two moneylenders speaking with Lloyd's father. Moneylender Shiloh says, "Baron, how much longer are you going to put this off?" And moneylender Meatloaf says, 5 days have passed since the date we agreed on. If you continue to drag your feet, we will have no choice but to take action. Lloyd's father looks on with a worried expression, a bit speechless. Moneylender Shiloh says, "Cat got your tongue? I bet if you sold some of the items in this place, you'll get some money." As Lloyd peeks through the door, he thinks to himself, perfect timing. And with a grin on his face, he continues to think to himself, they're here just in time. We see a notification that reads current RP 36. As Lloyd sits on his bed, he's thinking about the RP. I've gained some RP after raising Javier's approval rating of me. So how do I use it? That is the question. We then see a notification pop up. You can invest your RP on gaining abilities. Lloyd says out loud, wow. So this pop-up punk actually knows how to explain things. Another pop-up notification. Forget it. We didn't hear Lloyd say, hey, I'm sorry, I'll stop. Forgive me. A few clicks go by as we see that the screen is loading up. And then we see a circle form under the feet of Lloyd, which seems to be a scanner, and notifications pop up. Skill detected, soil mechanics. Skill detected, hydraulics. Skill detected, structural mechanics. Skill detected, water supply and sewage theory. Skill detected, steel structure design and concrete design. Skill detected, advanced design programming. As another notification pops up, huh? You know more than you look. Lloyd, frustrated, says out loud, do you really need to say that? I have a scholarship, for crying out loud. A notification pops up. Skills available based on existing knowledge. Basic surveying, RP needed 15. Basic design, RP needed 20. As Lloyd looks at the notification window, he thinks to himself, I can't tell what those are based off just this. Well, you know what? I have enough RP, so let's just click it and see. As he confirms the selection for both skills. The first skill that he acquires is basic surveying, and we see a flash of green light coming from his eyes. Whoa! What is this? As he runs to the window, he quickly opens it up, and he's thinking to himself, is this for real? I don't need a GPS surveyor. I can just see it all with my own eyes. As we see a blue grid-like design on the ground. The second skill that he receives is basic design, as he can now see the basic design of a construction. No way. Before this, I worked my butt off scribbling down the plans for the channels. As he thinks to himself, things will definitely be a lot easier going forward, but will Javier alone be enough to cover all the construction? It would be nice if I could summon some heavy machinery with my knowledge. Another notification pops up. If you want to summon, there is something. Lloyd says, what? Really? As he looks at the pop-up notification, another notification pops up. Random summon game. Spend RP to pick a summon. Unique personalities, a wide range of skills. Enter to get your own loyal summon partner now. Lloyd thinks to himself, what is this? Some kind of ad for a premium game? As he continues to look at the notification pops up, he notices that one says, random summon game. Start. 1 turn equals 50 RP. Lloyd thinks to himself, as if I only have 1 RP right now. A summon though, If that is what I think it is, as he thinks of fantastical creatures that he might get from the summon game, it could be as useful as heavy machinery, he says to himself. RP. I must get some more RP, and to do that, I need key characters like me. We then cut to a scene where we see a hand being slammed down on a desk. Baron Frontera, if you have no money, says moneylender Meatloaf, allow me to make a suggestion. And with a sinister grin on his face, he says to the Baron, if you sell the Baroness and her ladies to a very nice place, they would fetch a hefty sum. Baron looks on at moneylender Meatloaf, and he says with a worried look on his face, seeing his grin, how dare you? Just because you are a lender doesn't mean that you have to lack manners, does it? We then see Lloyd with a bag over his shoulder and his arm over the moneylender Meatloaf, and Meatloaf looking at Lloyd with a worried expression on his face. As he turns away and knocks Lloyd's arm off his shoulder, he says, who are you? The father responds, Lloyd? Moneylender Meatloaf says, the eldest son with the peculiar manners. Is that why you are so rudely interrupting our discussion? If you don't leave, Lloyd interrupts, whatever. Now, show me your warrant, he asks moneylender Meatloaf. Meatloaf, confused, asks, what? Lloyd responds, the Royal Family and Nobility Act, Article 3, Clause 6. All nobles may exercise their right to protect their interests as vassals of the king. Entry into the residence of a noble family without a warrant is considered trespassing. That's the key section. Lloyd looks with a serious face. Moneylender Meatloaf responds, what are you talking about? I've never even heard of such a law. Lloyd says back to him, oh, you didn't know? Then let's go find out together. Javier, Lloyd says. Yes, Master Lloyd. As we see Javier entering the room, hand on his sword, cut off this trespasser's arm. We see Lloyd with a menacing-like face. Javier begins to step toward the moneylenders. Moneylender Meatloaf, a bit scared, Whoa, wait, what? Moneylender Shiloh on the same type timing. What is this? We're going to sue. Lloyd responds with, like I said, let's go find out whose side the judge will take. As we see Javier unsheath his sword ready. As the moneylenders see this, they both get frightened. And full of fear, they begin to leave. Moneylender Meatloaf says to Lloyd, do you think you will be able to get away with this? And moneylender Shiloh responds with, you will regret this for sure. They both slam the door and hurriedly exit the residence. Lloyd just says, how absurd. The Baron says, Lloyd, Javier, what did you just do? We don't have enough money to stave them off. Lloyd just walks up to the desk and he drops the bag he was carrying in front of his father. And the father looks a bit surprised. Lloyd says to his father, I was planning to give it to you after I collected all the money from the orders, but this should be enough to cover the big part of this month's interest. The Baron looks at Lloyd and he says, money from the orders? You're taking money from our people, extorting money from them like this? Javier responds with, fear not, my lord. I will ensure that Master Lloyd fulfills the orders. The Baron a bit confused and a bit shocked, and Lloyd thinking to himself, looking at his face, I can see that he completely trusts Javier. Lloyd simply bows. Then we shall take our leave. Without the Baron saying anything, Lloyd and Javier begin to walk out of the room. And Javier says to Lloyd, how did you know about such a law? I always thought that you were the ignorant type. Lloyd says, I just picked it up somewhere, with a bit of frustration on his face. As he's thinking to himself, it's true that I did pick it up somewhere from you, Javier, in the book. We then cut to a scene where it's raining and we see Javier standing over two tombstones. It was right after the Baron and the Baroness committed suicide. The two loan sharks came to dig up the bodies and sell them. And that's when Javier says, the Royal Family and Nobility Act, Article 3, Clause 6. All nobles may exercise their right to protect their interests as vassals of the kingdom. After he says that, it was off with their heads, as we see a clean cut from Javier's sword and we see the heads of the two moneylenders go flying. And when Javier is brought before a judge, he is found not guilty. Lloyd thinks to himself, knowing the content of this story is a huge plus. Anyway, I should be getting a pop-up any second now. As like Lloyd says, we then see a pop-up notification that reads, Baron Frontera's approval rating of you has increased by 6. Another notification reads, you have earned 60 RP for improving your relationship with the key character. Current RP, 61. And Lloyd, with an excited smile on his face, thinks to himself, justice planned. I'm on my way, summon. As we cut to the next scene, it is the middle of the night and we see Lloyd standing in the middle of a field and he says out loud, okay, so there's no one around, right? Looking around to make sure that there's no one. He then says to the system, show me the summon game. As he presses the button, we get a flash of green light and we see gear wheels starting to form. Lloyd looks up at the flash and he sees the gear wheels and he says to himself, whoa, is that a magic circle? We then see the completed magic circle. Lloyd thinks to himself, this is so over the top. And on top of that, it is so tiny and it's so freaking noisy. We see a little creature starts to come out from the circle. Lloyd just looks on a bit confused and we see the creature plop on the ground. It looks up at him. As Lloyd stands there looking over the creature, he thinks to himself, so it's a dud. The creature, a bit choked up about what he said, is a bit sad. Lloyd says to the creature, what? You are not a dud? You can help me? Like what? Shoot acorns? Pew, pew. I don't need it. The creature waving his hands up at Lloyd with tears in his eyes. Oh no? Then show me what you can do, Lloyd says to the creature. The creature grabs his cheeks, and as he's chewing, Lloyd thinks to himself, what the yuck. As Lloyd picks up what it is that the creature has spit out from his mouth, he reads Podong User Manual. And we come to find out that Podong is an adorable hamster. Please give Podong lots of love. Feed Podong one of the enclosed sunflower seeds and its size will change. Red sunflower seeds. Podong grows to a gigantic proportions, effective for a maximum of 12 hours. Blue sunflower seeds. Podong shrinks back to the smaller size. Feed this to Podong before the 12-hour limit is up. Lloyd says, one set of the two colors of sunflower seeds is 1 RP. Just how big do you get? Like people size? Podong just responds with his name, Podong. But it seems that Lloyd can understand him, as he says, see for myself? Hamsters are good at tunneling. So if Podong can get to be as big as a human, that will be quite helpful. As he feeds the red sunflower seeds to Podong and the hamster begins to munch on the sunflower seeds, we see a flash. We then see Podong growing a bit bigger. So big that he slams into Lloyd, knocking him down. As Lloyd looks up at the hamster, he thinks to himself, what? What is that? 15 feet? As we see that Podong the hamster has now grown to a gigantic size. No, it's over 30 feet high. As Podong looks at him a bit with a smug on his face, Lloyd thinks to himself, he looks so smug and so cocky. Look at him. We then get a notification pop up. Podong's skill, digging level 1. We then see Podong start to dig through the dirt field with a great amount of speed and efficiency. Podong skill, packing dirt level 2. Another notification reads. We then see Podong rolling on the ground, packing the dirt up under him because of his enormous weight. Another notification pops up. Podong skill, cheek pockets, level 1. As we then see Podong with his mouth full, he spits out what looks to be a very large lump of dirt right at the feet of Lloyd. Lloyd just thinks to himself as he clenches his fist, jackpot, I've got my heavy equipment. We cut to a scene where as Lloyd is walking down the hall, he's thinking, but if someone sees me with this huge thing all of a sudden, they'll get very suspicious. I'll just carry a summoning book with me. And if anyone asks, I'll be like, oh, I'm a summoning master, problem solved, as he thinks, and pats Podong, which is inside of his coat pocket. Jeez, why am I so smart? I can't believe it. A snarky smirk on his face. Next, let's figure out the labor part of our construction project, shall we? As he steps hurriedly. Next, we see Lloyd standing in front of a group of men, all with shovels in their hands. And Lloyd says to him, repeat after me, safety first. All of the 30 soldiers of Lloyd Frontera's barony looks a bit tired and some a bit confused. And they repeat, safety first? Lloyd looks on at the men with a bit of a frustrating expression as he says, this is so frustrating. They're just like soldiers who get paid to do nothing. The Baron has a ton of debt. Why hasn't he gotten rid of them? Well, thanks to them, I now have free labor. And it's a good thing that I can put them to work. And with the grin on his face, he continues to tell the soldiers, listen up, you are all soldiers. And this here is the army. And what is the point of an army? It's to do work. As he puts and lifts his shovel on his shoulder, Lloyd thinks to himself, when I was in the army, I spent more time digging holes and pulling weeds than actually training. Lloyd points to some dirt over on the ground and he says to the soldiers, okay, do you see that pile of clay over there? That is the clay that I spent all night digging up. As we then see a scene that actually is what Podong dug up in only 30 minutes. But still, Lloyd says to the men, we are about to break ground on our state's renaissance. And I'm talking about the on-dog construction business for the people. To do that, I need all of you to move that clay to the construction site. All of the soldiers with a glum expression on their faces, a bit tired, a bit confused. Lloyd thinks to himself, it's okay, I expected this. Besides, Master Lloyd, someone calls his name, and Lloyd turns around to look at him, and the man asks, what are you asking my men here to do? We learn that this man is the senior knight in Lord Frontera's barony, Newman. Lloyd looks with a grin on his face. I expected him to confront me like this too. We learn that in this land there are 3 knights. We have Newman, the man here now. Under him is Bayern. And then we have the protagonist of the novel, Javier Asrahan. At the start of the book, when the estate falls into ruin, Javier and Bayern remain loyal until the very end. But our friend here is the very first to betray the Baron and run. And that's because Newman sells information on the Baron to the con man and leaves him with a huge debt. As Lloyd thinks to himself, looking at the Baron, it won't do for this man to be the land's foremost knight. He then says, Sir Newman, what does it look like I'm doing? Newman looks at Lloyd and he says, "You have ordered these honorable men to cover themselves in dirt, and as their commander, I won't tolerate this." Lloyd just looks at Sir Newman and he thinks to himself, "Bull, you're unhappy because I'm close to making money which could pay off the debts. I have my father's permission." Sir Newman continues, "I don't know how you fooled his lordship, but may I remind you of your prior conduct, young master. I think of no other reason for you to use my men other than your personal gains. Am I wrong?" As Lloyd sits on his shovel, he says nothing and he just listens. He then says, "No, that sounds right." But then he says with a serious expression, "If you want a beat down." Sir Newman, anger boiling up inside of him, veins popping out all on the side of his neck. Lloyd just thinks to himself, "Look at this fragile little man break down. If he ever played an online game, his fingers will be flying across the keyboard." We then see Lloyd slam his shovel into the ground and he thinks to himself, "Now let's press his buttons." We then see the next scene, Lloyd flinging some dirt at Sir Newman and the 30 soldiers that was on the sideline looking over with the most shocked expressions on their face, a bit stressing out, seeing the scene play out. Sir Newman blocking the dirt and Lloyd looking like he's having a bit of fun. "You," says Sir Newman to Lloyd with anger in his face, "you scoundrel. Did you just insult a knight's honor?" Looking at him with the most detestable look on his face, thinking to himself, "You're nothing but the son of a poor, soon-to-be ruined baron." Lloyd just looks at Sir Newman and he says, "Huh? What was that? Let's forget about ranks and fight this out? Word?" Lloyd then begins to twirl his shovel and he's holding it up at Sir Newman like a sword. "Let's do this thing. A duel, I mean," he says to Sir Newman. Newman just looks up at Lloyd, veins continuing to pop out from his face. "I'll make you regret it, you scoundrel." We then cut to a scene back at the manor and Javier is speaking with Lloyd and he says, "So, you will duel Sir Newman in 1 month's time? Are you confident that you can win?" he asked Lloyd. Lloyd just responds with, "What? Are you dumb? Of course not. He's a low-level sword expert knight who can use Manhwa skill, and I'm a nobody. What do you think? Were you even thinking when you said that?" As Javier puts his hand on his sword, frustrated from the answer he just received. "Are you even thinking in that head of yours, huh?" Javier just thinks to himself, "I was close to cutting him down right there. To suddenly throw dirt in Sir Newman's face and challenge him to a duel? I thought he was back to his old hooligan ways. But for that, it all seems too calculated. He asked the Baron to separate us in order to pick a fight with him. And then he designated Sir Bayern as a substitute overseer to supervise the work of the soldiers. And now he's not confident about the duel? I don't get it at all. How filthy. I wish I could cut him down." Lloyd looks up at Javier and he says, "So, Javier, there's something that I need you to do. Teach me how to use a sword." Javier looks at Lloyd and he simply responds with, "I refuse." Lloyd looks at Javier and he says, "Why?" And Javier responds with, "First of all, my job is only to watch you. And second of all, if scum like you, if human trash such as yourself learns how to use a sword, others around you would be in even greater danger." Lloyd responds with, "Hey, aren't you supposed to be toning it down when you correct yourself? Anyway, so you're saying that you don't want to teach me, right? Even if teaching me how to sword fight means that I'm going to cure your insomnia?" Javier, a bit surprised at what he said, thinks to himself, how does he know that? Lloyd just thinks to himself, it's in the book. And I also know the cause of your insomnia, with a smirk on his face. In the book, the Knight of Blood and Iron knights are typically divided into 4 ranks. Sword master being the top, high-level sword expert being the next, mid-level sword level expert, and low-level sword expert. And Javier, on the verge of transitioning from a high-level sword expert to a sword master, he's right on the border of a human and a superhuman. With his senses so sharpened, there is no way he can sleep. In other words, it's a side effect of being a sword master. Lloyd continues to think to himself, of course, though, there's no way he would know that in the backwoods like this. He then says to Javier, so, do we have a deal or not? It's no use pretending. You have insomnia written all over your face. Javier sighs and he says to Lloyd, fine, let us try. Lloyd says, Oh, really? No takebacks? And Javier smirks at Lloyd and says, of course, I know for a fact that you will fail. There is no remedy I haven't tried to cure this insomnia. From sleep cognition therapy, herbs, aromatherapy, exercises, and even Eastern medicines. We then cut to the next scene with Javier holding a pillow, soundly asleep in his rocking chair, and Lloyd standing over him, and he says, I've got you all figured out. I also knew how you were going to cure your insomnia. You first fell into a deep sleep while listening to a magic spell. So what did I do? We then cut to the next scene where we see that Lloyd thinking to himself, I read you my reinforced concrete textbook. At least 18 times more sleep inducing than any magic spell. And with a grin of satisfaction and burning with enthusiasm, he thinks to himself, now your swordsmanship is mine. The next day, we see Javier waking up sparkling, well rested from the sleep that he had gotten the night before, says to Lloyd, 50 laps around the perimeter, go. Lloyd looks at Javier, slowly turns, and he starts to step. Javier thinks to himself, he's running without complaint. Him? As Lloyd continues to make his laps around the field, he passes Javier and he says, I don't like this. Teach me some skills. As he makes another lap around the field and he passes Javier for the second time, he says, you thought I wouldn't do it, didn't you? You thought I would just refuse, didn't you? As he makes another lap around the field, he passes Javier for the third time and he says, and then you would be like, you don't have what it takes and refuse to teach me, huh? Javier looks a bit frustrated because he's been figured out. As Lloyd continues to dash around and make another lap, he's laughing out loud. Now what? I'm going to finish running. We then see a notification alert pop up. The passive skill, Annoying Brat, rose to level 4. That lump you call a head is calling out to the people around for a slap. Lloyd shouts, I know you just made up that. Buzz off. As he continues running, and he's panting for dear life, he thinks to himself, this is hard to be honest. I'd be lying if I said it wasn't. Sweating bullets, he continues to run and thinks, but compared to when I was in Korea, this is so much better. Without even a family to welcome me, I awoke each day in a tiny room at a boarding house. I spent all day carrying bricks up the roof of a 4-story building and all night loading and unloading delivery trucks, all so I wouldn't starve to death. I held on to the hope that one day things would get better. Hold on a little longer, Suho. It'll get better someday. You're working so hard. You deserve it. Just a little more, a little more. As we see Suho reaching out to the light, then the light gets dimmer and dimmer until it goes completely dark and we see Suho on the ground. Compared to that pain, that despair, with a smile on his face, he says, this is nothing. As he continues to make his laps, Javier thinks to himself as he's watching him, if you are so determined, then I will teach you my sword fighting techniques. We then get a notification. Your approval rating by Javier increased by 1 point. Your approval rating, -28. You earned 18 RP by improving your relationship with the key character. Current RP is 29. We then cut back to the manor. Lloyd's father is speaking with Sir Newman. I can't believe his disrespect when you've protected our family for 5 generations. I thought that he had come to his senses recently, but I see that I was wrong. I have no just cause to stop this duel. However, as my heir, do not be too harsh with him. Do enough not to hurt him seriously, but pull him back to his senses. The Baron says to Sir Newman, and Sir Newman bows, and he says simply, as you wish, my lord. But he's thinking to himself, duels don't always go the way we want. As he grins. Walking down the hall, he continues to think to himself, if I cut off that cocky hooligan's head and kill him, and if the Baron takes issue with that, I'll kill the Baron and the Baroness too, and disguise it as a suicide. And as planned, I'll leave this tiny village and go somewhere bigger. Thanks to that hooligan, things are speeding up for me. As he laughs maniacally walking down the hallway. We then cut to 1 month later, and we see that Sir Newman and Lloyd are standing out and they're getting ready to duel. The place is packed. Everyone is there in attendance. We see Javier, Bayer. We see the Baron and the Baroness all looking on at the duel, getting ready to start up. Next, we see Sir Newman. Are you ready, young master? He says to Lloyd. Lloyd stands and he has his shovel in his hand. As he kicks it and flings it over his shoulder, he says to Sir Newman, of course, ready to knock your lights out. As the crowd is onlooking, the duel that's getting ready to start, We hear murmurs in the background. What is that? Is that a shovel? Is he going to fight Sir Newman with that? We see Sir Newman frustrated at the murmurs behind him. We see Javier thinking to himself, a solid iron shovel? So that's what he asked the blacksmith for. Lloyd's father, the Baron, worried, thinks to himself, that boy, so it was all a joke in the end. A bit disappointed, Javier says to himself, a joke? I don't believe so. When I think of what he showed me over the last month, we then see Lloyd preparing, training, and Javier continues to think to himself, performing basic training in small hours without a peep, running around the construction sites to teach the village engineers about Ondo, and then sword work practice right up until he went to sleep. That was not the disposition of someone preparing a joke. Master Lloyd is more serious than ever right now. The Baron raises his hand and he says, now, let the duel between Lloyd Frontera and Sir Newman begin. We then see Sir Newman brandish his sword with the sheath still attached. We then see Lloyd hold up his shovel in an awkward position with a smile on his face. Javier thinks to himself, what is that lackluster pose? Sir Newman jumps and he says out loud, swinging his sword ferociously, are you playing with me right now? Lloyd simply points his shovel forward and he blocks the oncoming attack from Sir Newman. Everyone surprised. Javier, the Baron, Sir Newman thinks to himself, frustrated. Luck doesn't strike twice as he swings his sword. Lloyd blocks another one of Sir Newman's attacks. Javier is looking on, surprised, a bit speechless, thinking to himself, his movements is so efficient. It's a skill adapted specifically for real life fighting. It's as if our swordsmanship has evolved through the ages. As we look back at the duel and we see Sir Newman shocked and without anything to say, as Lloyd points his shovel towards his way, Lloyd thinks to himself, why are you so surprised? Any Korean man would know how to do this. This is the essence of modern hand-to-hand combat, bayonet training. As we see a picture of soldiers standing out performing bayonet training in unison. The next scene cuts to Lloyd jabbing his shovel towards Sir Newman and Sir Newman dodging the attack. Lloyd thinks to himself, besides, the shovel is a much more formidable weapon than one may think. As Sir Newman goes in for another attack, his attack is blocked. Lloyd continues to think to himself, the wide blade can be used as a shield. It can cut through thick roots. And if I do this, as he puts his shovel in the ground, I can ride it like a pogo stick, moving around really fast and jumping in front of Sir Newman, laughing, bring it on, come at me. As Javier's looking on at the duel, he thinks to himself with a bit of a surprised expression on his face. Wait, was this all a joke? As he on looks, seeing Sir Lloyd laughing or not, questioning himself about this duel and how it's playing out. We then see Sir Newman going in frantically for another attack, and we see Lloyd assume the lackluster position he did before, thinking to himself, the first weapon that I prepared to destroy you, Newman, was this shovel. And the second is the basic sword fighting steps that I learned from Javier as he begins to swing his shovel, performing the swordsmanship that he was taught by Javier. Sir Newman, blocking the attacks, is starting to begin to groan, and he's thinking to himself, worried as he's actually struggling in this fight. He says, you bottle-loving lowlife, where is this strength coming from? And my third weapon is this. We then see a notification pop up. Skill expansion, shoveling, level 1. The shovel and I are now 1. All of your physical stats increase when holding the shovel. We cut back to a scene where Lloyd is running laps and Javier is overlooking his training. And Lloyd thinks to himself, the +1 in approval rating that I got while training with Javier, plus the +2 and the +3 that I got from the Baron and the Baroness, brought my RP up to, and we see a notification read current RP 97, and another notification pop up. Would you like to learn the skill extension, shoveling, required RP 40? Lloyd, looking at the notification, thinks to himself, and gave me the sweetest skill ever. Cutting back to the duel, we see Lloyd in position and we see Sir Newman getting ready to attack. Sir Newman exhales. I have no other choice. Against a civilian, I didn't think I would need to do this. As he swings his sword, we then see blue aura starting to form around him. Javier, on looking the duel, looks at Sir Newman and he sees that the aura in his body is beginning to move to the core. Lloyd thinks to himself, so he is summoning Mana Heart. We then see that all the aura that was in his body has converged onto the heart, and Sir Newman begins to raise his blade, and he says to Lloyd, we're only getting started, you hooligan. And in the next scene, Sir Newman getting ready for an attack, moving at high speeds. Javier thinks to himself, for someone without the skill, it takes over 10 years for a regular person. It takes at least 5 years to summon the Mana Heart. It will be impossible for Master Lloyd to block an attack with so much mana. As we then see Sir Newman's sword coming down on Lloyd, Javier finishes his thought. Normally. We then see Lloyd raising his shovel, and we see Sir Newman thinking to himself, you fool, I will crack that blade and that head of yours in one fell swoop. The Baroness, scared and surprised, and the Baron looking on worried at what's about to happen to his son. We see that the attack that Sir Newman had put against Lloyd had connected to the tip of his shovel, but he has a surprised expression on his face and begins to sweat a bit. He thinks to himself, what is this? He begins to stagger. It is as if the strength in my body is leaving me. Lloyd thinks to himself, and now for the fourth weapon that I have prepared. Lloyd continues, the mana conjuring skill that made Javier the strongest man in the world in this story, the Azrahan core technique. As Sir Newman pulls away his attack, he shouts out, you absorbed my mana? And as Lloyd begins to swing his shovel, whack! We then see a tooth flying out. Sir Newman thinks to himself, what is that? Is that my tooth? Clang! Right under the chin for the second attack with the hilt of the shovel. We then see Lloyd preparing his next attack. As then the shovel comes down square on the back of Sir Newman's head, and he slams to the ground. The onlookers looking expressionless and speechless and surprised all in one. Javier stands saying nothing. The Baron surprised at what he's seeing. Then we begin to hear whispers in the crowd. What? Master Lloyd won? What are you talking about? This is weird, huh? The Baron, still surprised from what just had taken place, begins to say, I declare Lloyd Frontera the winner of this duel. Sir Newman, on the ground face down and his eyes wide open in disbelief, thinks to himself after hearing the Baron, what? What did he just say? I, the sword expert, lost to that lowlife? As Lloyd begins to step in front of Sir Newman laying on the ground, he says, so, did you hear? I won the duel. Well, now that that's over with, he begins another attack. It's time for you to take your pounding. Pause. He says to Sir Newman. Sir Newman looks up from the ground at Lloyd, fear on his face. The Baron shouts, Lloyd, what are you doing? The duel is already over. We then cut to the next scene as we see Lloyd with his shovel maniacally and with a devil-like expression on his face and horns take as many swings and whacks as he possibly can, screaming, take that. Sir Newman in the fetal position, taking the licks. Lloyd! Baron screams out at Lloyd in disbelief at what he's seeing right now. We then see a couple of guys from the crowd run over and grab Lloyd, saying to him, enough, Master Lloyd, the duel is over. It's over. Sir Bayer, who was standing next to Javier, says out loud, has he lost his senses? Javier stands there without saying anything. He only thinks to himself, has he? I don't know. As Lloyd regains his composure, he says to the two men, okay, it's good. All right, I'm fine. Let go. You can let go now. The men let go. Lloyd takes a breath. And then he goes back in for the attack. Master Lloyd, stop. Damn, it's good. He's done. He got it. As he's taking more swings at Sir Newman on the ground in the fetal position, Javier just looks on at him, hearing the swings. From my view, he thinks to himself, he looks like he's precisely hitting him to hurt every single part of his body. As Sir Newman is agonizing in pain from being hit by this iron shovel from Lloyd. Javier continues to think to himself as Lloyd swings the shovel with that calm face. He looked like he's already predicted the events to come, as if he knows everything already. We then cut to a scene where Lloyd is talking to Javier while they were training. He says, "Now, teach me the Azrahan core technique." Javier turned, stunned, looks at Lloyd without saying a word. Lloyd says, "What? Why do you look as if you're on the run? Did I ask you to teach me how to steal something?" Lloyd continues, "The core method draws in mana from the surroundings, not just the mana that is conjured by the individual. It's like that, right?" Javier, still surprised, he says, "Master Lloyd, how do you know about that?" Thinking to himself, it is a technique that I have yet to tell anyone about, and it is still unfinished. Lloyd, looking at Javier with wide eyes and without much expression on his face, simply says, "You talk about it in your sleep. Every time I put you to bed with my lullaby." As Javier is looking at Lloyd, he thinks to himself, am I just imagining him with a strangely brazen face? But aside from talking in my sleep, there is no way for him to know about it. Forgive me, but I cannot teach you that. The technique is not yet finished. As Lloyd finishes Javier's sentence, he continues, "So that means you'll teach it to me if I help you perfect it." Javier looks at Lloyd and he says, "If that is possible, yes." As he thinks, what is with that confidence? As Lloyd stabs his sword into the ground, he says, "Okay, so listen, I'm guessing you're trying to take the outside mana and then combine it with the mana heart within you," as he shows examples with his hands. He continues, "As a result, it goes boing and bounces off. I think that seems obvious. From your mana heart's point of view, it's a foreign object, right? So it's a matter of changing the way that you look at it. Don't think of it as mixing the absorbed mana into your mana heart, but condensing it separately nearby and then using it around you on the outside. It's like having an auxiliary engine next to the main engine, as if they're one but also separate. What do you think? Sounds good, right?" Javier, a bit confused. "It definitely seems plausible. Master Lloyd, how did you..." Thinking to himself, though, I'm not sure what an engine is. And with the stone cold still face like expression on his face, Lloyd simply says, "Huh? I was just spitballing. Did it make sense? Nice." Javier continues to think again. It's that face again. He clearly knows something. Javier says to himself, "So in that moment, I was able to perfect the Azran core technique, which I had been agonizing over for a long time. On the first try, I was able to get successfully up to 3 circles. With more training, I'm sure I can get up to 4 or 5 more. A notification pops up. Your approval rating by Javier increased by +5. Lloyd looks at Javier and he says, "What? Do you think I have nothing better to do other than learn how to use mana heart? I don't need all that. Just teach me the absorbing bit. I don't need the mana from the air, just the mana that comes into contact with my body." Master Lloyd determined that with this knowledge, he would be able to beat Sir Newman. We then cut back to the scene where Lloyd is still swinging at Sir Newman on the ground, and Javier thinking, and he did win, easily. The Baron, frustrated and angry, shouts at Lloyd, "Lloyd, do you not hear me telling you to stop? I won't tolerate you sullying the knight's honor any longer." And with that, after hearing his father's words, he stopped swinging, sweating and tired from his onslaught on Sir Newman. He says out loud, "This knight's honor, my lord. Take a look under that tablecloth and then decide if those words are befitting of Sir Newman." The Baron looks under the tablecloth and he sees letters. He begins to read one of the letters, and as he's reading the letter, he's shocked. He's surprised. They are letters between Sir Newman and the tortoise, the man who defrauded you in a real estate deal. The financial status of our land, our lordship's preferences, plans to forge real estate documents. Everything they discussed are in those letters. Sir Newman, beat up, toothless, and with a swollen eye, thinks to himself, I hid them in a wall. How did he? As Sir Lloyd grins, thinking to himself, yeah, Javier finds them later in the book. I had Pudong scamper around for them last night, as we see that a hamster that he had summoned had the letter in his mouth. As the Baron slumps back in his chair, surprised as what he's reading, Lloyd thinks to himself, he really is a kind person, as described in the book. Anyone else will be demanding his head right now. Lloyd continues, I'm sorry, but a kind leader and a good leader are two completely different things. If you are thinking about how to deal with this man, I would like to offer a suggestion, Lloyd says to his father. Oh, I see. And what is it? The Baron replies. Let us drop a vicious mouse on this man's head. If he is hurt by that mouse, let him be exiled from the land. Otherwise, demote him to a foot soldier and give him the opportunity to repent. What do you say, my lord? Sir Lloyd says to his father, the Baron. The crowd begins to whisper. A mouse? Why a mouse of all things? Sir Newman would never be hurt by a mouse. What do you think? The Baron, speechless at what Lloyd had just said to him, thinks to himself, oh, so what he's saying is to offer him the opportunity to repent with the awareness that he may be given a greater punishment at any time by giving him a chance to pass. The Knight Surveyor says out loud, this is wise. It is generous while also being a warning to others. The Baron says to Lloyd, very well. Let's do as you say, Lloyd. Lloyd says, Sir Newman, do you have any objections? Sir Newman replies with no. I am grateful for your mercy. Lloyd looks upon Sir Newman and he says, mercy, you say. If you offer a guilty party a merciful outcome, will they have a change of heart and repent? Not a chance. What's wrong with him? He's soft. They'll grow more stubborn and cunning and think of ways to rise above you. You will regret this, Baron Frontera, as we see Sir Newman thinking to himself on the ground. I will have revenge on you and your low-life son. Lloyd says to Sir Newman, oh my, it's nice to see you smile, though. It'd be for the last time. Newman, confused by what Lloyd is saying, he asks him, what does that mean? Lloyd simply replies, what do you think it means? As he hands a red seed to Pudong, his hamster. Sir Lloyd then flings Pudong in the air, high in the air, and he says to Sir Newman, looking at him with a menacing face, the best way to ask for forgiveness is to remember that there is none. As Pudong takes a crunch from the red seed, he begins to grow gigantic. Everyone shocked, onlooking the summon as it begins to grow to gigantic proportions. They see that a hamster is falling from the sky, a very big one at that, and we see Sir Lloyd running away from the point of impact, and Sir Newman looking up with the biggest eyes ever, mouth wide open, shocked at the scene that's happening in front of him. And then Pudong coming in, crash, and slam right into Sir Newman, causes a big, great shock wave. Smoke billows up in the air, and then we cut to the scene where Pudong has flattened Sir Newman, and Lloyd thinking to himself, what a shame. He raises his finger and he simply says, exile, thinking to himself, and with this, the rotten apple of this land is gone.